Imagine a world where Ireland never existed as we know it, where French fries were never invented, where half of Europe's population simply wasn't born. Sounds impossible, right? But this was Europe before 1570, a continent perpetually on the brink of starvation, where famines killed millions, and where the population couldn't grow beyond what grain crops could support. Then a group of Spanish conquistadors stumbled upon something in the mountains of Peru that would accidentally save Europe from itself. And stick around to the end, because I'm going to reveal the shocking reason why Europeans almost rejected this miracle food entirely, and the bizarre superstition that nearly kept the potato out of Europe forever. To understand why the potato mattered so much, we need to picture 16th century Europe, a place where survival was a daily gamble. European agriculture was stuck in a rut. The three-field crop rotation system had been used for centuries. Wheat one year, legumes the next, fallow the third. It was predictable, but it was also limiting. Food production determined everything. Cities couldn't grow. Armies couldn't expand. Empires were limited by how many mouths they could feed. Europe's population was perpetually capped by grain production. Famines were regular visitors. Bad weather? Famine. War disrupting planting? Famine. Plant disease? Catastrophic famine. Between 1500 and 1800, France alone experienced 40 nationwide famines. 40. And here's the cruel part. Much of Europe's land was useless. Mountains, rocky soil, marginal land that couldn't support wheat or barley. These areas remained sparsely populated, their potential locked away. Meanwhile, halfway around the world, the Inca Empire was thriving in conditions that would have devastated European agriculture. How? They had a secret weapon. High in the Andes Mountains of Peru, at altitudes where European crops would simply give up and die, indigenous peoples had been cultivating potatoes for over 7,000 years. This wasn't just farming, it was agricultural genius. The peoples of the Andes had domesticated the wild potato and developed thousands of varieties, each adapted to specific altitudes, climates, and growing conditions. We're not talking about the uniform potatoes you see in supermarkets today. Andean potatoes came in an incredible diversity. Some were tiny as marbles, others large as melons. Colors ranged from deep purple to bright yellow to mottled red and white. What made potatoes revolutionary? They could grow where grain crops failed. Cold? No problem. Poor soil? Potatoes don't care. Short growing season? Potatoes mature faster. High altitude? That's where they thrive. The Inca Empire built its civilization on potato agriculture. They developed sophisticated storage techniques, freeze-drying potatoes into chuno that could last for years. This allowed them to maintain armies, build cities, and support a population of up to 12 million people in terrain that Europeans considered uninhabitable. Their agricultural terraces were engineering marvels, creating microclimates that extended the range where different potato varieties could grow. The Incas understood something Europeans hadn't learned. Diverse crops equals food security. Enter Francisco Pizarro and his conquistadors in 1532. They came for gold and silver. They found those, of course, and promptly destroyed one of the world's most sophisticated civilizations in the process. But in their plundering, they stumbled upon something far more valuable than precious metals, though they didn't realize it at the time. Spanish soldiers noticed that Inca armies traveled with strange, dried provisions. Local people ate these odd tubers that grew underground. The conquistadors tried them, mostly because they'd eat anything when supplies ran low, and found them adequate, not exciting, but filling. The first written European description of the potato appeared in 1553 by Spanish chronicler Pedro Cieza de Leon. He called them papas, the Quechua name, and noted they were like truffles and became as soft as cooked chestnuts when boiled. But here's what's fascinating. The Spanish weren't immediately impressed. They were looking for spices, silk, gold, exotic luxuries they could sell for fortunes back home. A lumpy tuber that grew in dirt? That was peasant food. However, Spanish ships needed provisions for the long voyage back to Europe. Potatoes were easy to store, didn't spoil quickly, and could be prepared simply. So potatoes began their journey across the Atlantic, almost by accident, not as a treasured discovery, but as ship provisions. The exact date is debated by historians, but most evidence points to potatoes arriving in Spain somewhere between 1565 and 1580. They likely landed first in the Canary Islands, a Spanish colony used as a stopover, then made their way to mainland Spain. So the potato arrives in Europe. Problem solved, right? Everyone embraces this miracle crop and famine's end? Not even close. Europeans looked at potatoes with deep suspicion. And honestly, they had their reasons. First, potatoes are members of the nightshade family, the same family as deadly nightshade, a plant every European peasant knew was poisonous. The potato plant's leaves and flowers are actually toxic. Not exactly a promising first impression. Second, the edible part grows underground, hidden from sight. In a religious era where light equals good and darkness equals evil, this seemed inherently suspicious. Food from the darkness? What kind of devilry was this? Third, and this is where it gets weird, potatoes weren't mentioned in the Bible. Therefore, some religious authorities argued, they must not be fit for Christian consumption. God would have mentioned them if they were important, right? But the strangest objection? Europeans believed potatoes caused leprosy. Why? Because potatoes are knobby and lumpy, and leper's skin is knobby and lumpy, so obviously eating one would cause the other. This wasn't just peasant superstition. Educated people believed this. For decades, potatoes were grown as ornamental curiosities. Wealthy Europeans planted them in botanical gardens. Marie Antoinette reportedly wore potato flowers in her hair as a fashion statement. But eat them regularly? That was still considered beneath dignity. Governments tried to encourage potato cultivation and faced fierce resistance. In some regions, peasants had to be threatened with fines or imprisonment to get them to plant potatoes. The potato's conquest of Europe was painfully slow. Spain in the 1570s, Italy by the 1580s, England around 1590, France not until the 1600s. And even then, these were isolated plantings, not widespread cultivation. So what changed? Why did Europe finally embrace the potato? War. Specifically, the devastating wars of the 17th and 18th centuries. Here's the brutal military logic of the era. Armies would deliberately destroy grain fields and stores to starve their enemies. Wheat fields were targets. Grain stores were prizes. Traditional agriculture made you vulnerable. But potatoes? Potatoes grew underground, hidden from sight. Armies could march right over a potato field and not know it was there. Even if soldiers uprooted the plants, the damaged tubers would often regenerate. Peasants in war-torn regions discovered that potatoes were the one crop that could survive military devastation. Suddenly, that devil's food didn't look so bad when it was the only thing standing between you and starvation. Adoption accelerated dramatically. Prussia's Frederick the Great actively promoted potato cultivation in the 1740s, even posting guards around potato fields to make them seem valuable, reverse psychology at work. In France, Antoine-Augustin Parmentier became the potato's greatest champion. After being fed potatoes as a prisoner of war in Prussia, he returned to France convinced they could solve food shortages. Parmentier was a marketing genius. He hosted fancy dinners where every course featured potatoes, attended by luminaries like Benjamin Franklin. He convinced King Louis XVI to wear potato flowers, making them fashionable. He guarded his potato fields during the day but left them unguarded at night, encouraging theft by curious peasants. But nowhere did the potato make a bigger impact than Ireland. Ireland had rocky, wet soil poorly suited to grain crops. But it was perfect for potatoes. Irish families discovered that an acre of potatoes could feed a family of 6 for a year, plus a pig. An acre of wheat? It would feed maybe 2 people. The results were astounding. Ireland's population exploded from around 3 million in 1700 to over 8 million by 1840. The potato made this possible. The potato didn't just feed Europe, it transformed it. The numbers are staggering. An acre of potatoes produces roughly 3 times the calories of an acre of wheat. 3 times. And it does it in marginal conditions where wheat might fail entirely. Suddenly, all that useless land, mountains, rocky soil, marginal farmland, became productive. Populations could expand into previously uninhabitable areas. This enabled the Industrial Revolution. Cities could grow larger because surrounding agricultural land could support more people. Workers could leave farms for factories because potato agriculture was so efficient that fewer farmers could feed more city dwellers. Armies could expand. Napoleon's armies marched on potatoes. So did Prussia's. The potato changed military logistics fundamentally. From Europe, potatoes spread globally. British colonists brought them to North America, though indigenous peoples in South America had been growing different varieties for millennia. Dutch traders carried them to Asia. They reached Japan, China, India. Today, potatoes are the world's fourth largest food crop after rice, wheat, and corn. More than 1 billion people eat them regularly. They're grown on every continent except Antarctica. Remember that shocking reason Europeans almost rejected potatoes forever? The bizarre superstition I promised to reveal? Here it is, and it's wonderfully ridiculous. Potatoes were believed to be aphrodisiacs. Seriously, in conservative, religious 16th and 17th century Europe, this was a problem. Church authorities and moral guardians warned that potatoes would increase lust and lead to promiscuity. Where did this idea come from? Possibly because potatoes came from the same exotic New World that gave Europe tobacco and chocolate, both of which were also considered aphrodisiacs. Or maybe because they're vaguely suggestive in shape, people saw what they wanted to see. The belief was so widespread that Shakespeare referenced it. In The Merry Wives of Windsor, Falstaff exclaims, "Let the sky rain potatoes," in a sexually suggestive context. So you had government officials trying to prevent famine by promoting potato cultivation, while simultaneously having to battle church authorities who warned that potatoes would turn the population into lustful sinners. Imagine millions of lives saved by a food that was nearly banned because people thought it was too sexy. The potato, savior of Europe, enemy of chastity. The ultimate irony? Today, potatoes are considered about as unsexy and mundane as food gets. They're comfort food, peasant food, boring but reliable. How times change. But we can't tell this story without acknowledging the tragedy. The same efficiency that made potatoes revolutionary also made them dangerous. Ireland became so dependent on a single crop, specifically a single variety of potato, that when potato blight struck in 1845, the results were catastrophic. The Irish potato famine killed approximately 1 million people and forced another million to emigrate. It remains one of the darkest chapters in European history. The lesson? Diversity matters. The Andes had thousands of potato varieties, many resistant to different diseases. Europe had cultivated only a handful, all genetically similar, all vulnerable to the same blight. Today, organizations work to preserve potato genetic diversity, maintaining seed banks with thousands of varieties from around the world, insurance against future crop failures. So here's the incredible truth. Spanish conquistadors went to Peru seeking gold and silver. They found it, melted it down, shipped it back to Spain, and within a few generations, it was mostly spent. But the humble potato they brought back almost as an afterthought, that changed the world forever. It fed populations that couldn't be fed before. It enabled cities to grow. It powered the Industrial Revolution. It changed military strategy. It saved millions from starvation. All because Spanish sailors needed something cheap and durable for ship provisions, and Peruvian farmers had spent 7,000 years perfecting an incredible crop. The next time you eat a potato, whether it's French fries, mashed, roasted, or however you like them, remember, you're eating a food that quite literally built the modern world. What's your favorite way to eat potatoes? And did you know about their incredible history? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you enjoyed this journey through potato history, hit that like button and subscribe for more food history deep dives. Until next time, appreciate your potatoes. They've earned it.